It's hard work to really give yourself the chance at what you really want in your life. Particularly women, I think it's hard to, when we're so culturally kind of indoctrinated to being taking care of other people, taking care of kids, partners, family. There's this feeling of guilt and sometimes even anxiety around, like, can I have my own goals? Is it worth it? And the answer is yes.
All right. Welcome back, you guys, to another episode of the Beyond the Scale podcast. I am so excited about today's guest. Today, we have Coach Lauren Vallee, who has spent the better part of her life in high performance sports and has been a professional endurance coach for over a decade. She is a USA Triathlon Level 2 coach and the owner of Valiant Endurance. Lauren is a two-time Ironman World Championship qualifier and multiple-time Ironman 70.3 World Championship qualifier. She placed 9th in the females 35 to 39 age group in the 2021 Ironman World Championship at St. George, Utah, and Lauren was ranked 8th in the nation in her age group at the end of 2022 season. Lauren has worked with athletes of all abilities and experience levels though currently she focuses on working with high-performing age group triathletes. Lauren has a second master's degree in counseling psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute and has a small private practice today as a depth psychotherapist for athletes and high performers. So, welcome, Lauren. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Thank you for having me. It's really nice kind of to hear the things that I've done read back to me. I never really think about all that I've done, and appreciate the introduction.
Yeah, of course. And I am so excited to dive into some of the things that you've done. I have never competed in an Ironman, but interestingly enough, the Ironman has a 3-year contract with where we're living right now. And so they have it's not a full Ironman. It's one of the mini ones. It's the one where I think you run half a marathon and it's half the biking distance. I'm not sure what you call that.
Ironman 70.3. So a half Ironman is what you could call it.
But you've competed in those, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so we have been to the Ironman to watch the last 2 years, and it's just been so fun. And every year, I literally look at Trevor and my husband, and I'm like, I'm going to do this next year, but I don't. I know it requires.
What's the thing holding you back?
What's holding me back is the biking. I grew up swimming, so I was on the swim team every summer. We actually did it as a family thing. My mom did it, my brother did it, and I swam for 10 years. And I love to run, but the biking, I just don't have any experience really cycling. So that's the part that's holding me back.
Yeah. Well, the good news is that typically the bike is the easiest part to train somebody for.
Really?
And if you can swim and run, those are typically the 2 things people don't enjoy doing out of the 3. So.
And the running at the end, it's just amazing to me to watch these people cross the finish line. They're in their wetsuits and then they go into their biking suits. And then some of them are shedding all of their layers and they're just running in these little spandex shorts, some of the men, and just watching them on that final mile. I just try to put myself in their shoes. I'm how are they even breathing right now? It's amazing.
Yeah, it certainly feels like something else when you're doing it.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Well, okay. So for our audience, Lauren and I got connected through my husband, actually. So they kind of grew up together, went to the same high school for a little while. And he was like, hey, you need to have this lady that I know from school on your podcast. And I started looking into your story and your background. I was like, oh my gosh, she would be perfect to talk about your journey as an athlete, where you are today. And then, so many of our clients, I hear this a lot. They say, I used to be an athlete, or I used to play competitive sports. I used to be so good at this. And they're saying that usually because they've gained 50, 75 pounds and they're looking in the mirror, they're coming into the gym for the first time saying to themselves, I didn't used to be like this. It's they're almost justifying what has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, but they're saying I used to be athletic. And in my mind, I'm always thinking you still are. You've just had a lot of things happen in your life that have now changed your body. They have changed your schedule. You might not have the same schedule that you did back then to train every day like you did when you were an athlete. And so I definitely want to talk a little bit about that today. But before we do that, I want you to kind of walk us through your journey growing up. I know you were an athlete. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. So I grew up doing all the sports. My mom kept us very busy because this is not her words, but I think she would say that tired children were well-behaved children. I was probably not well behaved, but I was the middle of in between two brothers. I had an older brother and a younger brother. So I grew up swimming in the summers, playing tennis in the summers. I played ice hockey from age 8 to 18. Almost went to college to play hockey, but changed my mind kind of last minute. So really was good at hockey, and I kind of regret not pursuing it in college, but I don't really regret the way my life has played out. I think it all worked out the way it was supposed to. But yeah, always been an athlete. I've always been a bigger person. Like, I look at pictures from when I was a kid because I felt like a fat kid. I did eat my share of Oreos and like snack foods with kind of like reckless abandon, because I didn't really know like, oh, Oreos are delicious. I can have 7 of them. And so, I always felt like a fat kid. I felt big, and because I was taller than most of the girls in my school, and I am muscular. I naturally look like I should be doing CrossFit. That is how I am built. And I'm certainly not built as an optimal triathlete. Really hard to balance this fact that I was really quite naturally talented at sports, but also things like running were so hard for me. I hated running the mile in gym class, but I loved playing field hockey. So it was, just this strange experience of being an athlete and feeling like my body was something that held me back in some ways. But then playing hockey, I was super strong and loved the way that I felt out on the ice. So I think that the battle I've had with my body continues today. I had an eating disorder in college. And went through a period of really bad depression in college where I was just really down. I just didn't really feel good or happy. And I was like, nothing bad has happened to me. Like, I don't understand why this is happening. And so I went into treatment for disordered eating. And at that time, I started working at the rec center at DePaul, which is where I did my undergrad. And I loved working at the rec center. And this guy, who's like one of my really good friends now, would come into the rec center at 5:30 in the morning to teach like a spin class. And he was always so happy. And I was like, one day I was just like, what's your deal? Why are you so happy? Almost like, depressed, sad, like 21-year-old, 20-year-old. He's like, life's good, man. What's there, not to be happy about? And I was like, everything. And so we became friends because I just really was attracted to this energy he had, and found out he taught a triathlon training group at DePaul. And so he invited me to come and join them. And so I started getting up in the morning under the guidance of like my doctor and nutritionist and therapist. And I started training with this group, and it changed my life. I found this sport of triathlon that I just loved, and I was not good. I was not. I weighed 178 pounds, was just feeling like kind of like you mentioned, some of your clients are like, what happened to like me being an athlete? Like, I wasn't an athlete for the first 2 years in college. I went from being, super athletic to like doing the elliptical for half an hour in college. And that just wasn't satisfying to me. And so as I got fitter, there's like this energy that comes around with becoming fitter and starting to like develop goals for yourself and dreaming about like, wow, this is what I want for myself. I don't know how to get there necessarily. And so I set a goal in 2006. I think I set the goal to qualify for Kona, which is the Ironman World Championships. Had I known it would take me like 13 years or 10 years, a decade, it took me a very long time to finally qualify, but I did. But man, talk about a bittersweet, challenging road to get to that place. So
it's amazing. 13 years.
Yeah. I think it was 10 years and 13 or 14 attempts to qualify. I think that's what it was.
Now, how many triathlons, mini triathlons, any version have you completed today?
Oh, I don't A lot. I've been racing since 2004, so almost 20, wow, almost 20 years.
Wow.
That is crazy to think
Yeah,
about.
that is awesome. I want to go back a second, what you said about, the friend that you met, and he wasn't your friend at the time, but just his positive energy and how you were attracted by that. And that's so powerful, because I say this all the time, like the people that you spend your time with, and if they're, A players, if they're doing something that you want to do, or if they're inspiring you in some way, then they're going to help you level up in any area of your life. And that's essentially kind of what he did for you, which is amazing. And it's just like the power of proximity, of just being close to people that are exemplifying an energy that you want to have, or doing something that you want to do, that you aspire to be.
Yeah, I think what was really powerful about him in particular, and to your point about power of proximity, when it's authentic and not put on, I think it's really quite powerful to be like, oh, wow, like, is this person, full of it, or are they really living and embodying this like positive experience of like, yeah, like life is pretty good. This person is a really good friend of mine now, and we've seen each other through really hard times in life. And we always come back to keeping things as lighthearted as we can, even in really dark, challenging moments. And so, yeah, you're right. I think finding people that inspire something in you is important.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I love that. Okay. So you got really into competing, and then tell us what you did, like your next step from there after college.
Well, so I went to grad school immediately after I finished my undergrad at Ohio State. I worked for Ohio State in their rec sports department, hoping actually to like go into that as a career. I was really involved in campus recreation because of what it gave me in that really hard time in my life.
Mhm.
And then I actually found I didn't really enjoy the work anymore. I was like, this is not what I want to do. And I started working for a corporate fitness company. After that, I got married, was in Ohio for a decade probably. During that time, I quit the corporate fitness job after like 2 years because I felt like it wasn't the right environment for me to thrive. Like I wasn't working with the type of people that I knew that I could inspire. I'm oriented to working with like a certain type of person, I guess. And so that led me to starting my coaching company, which it was originally called Base Try Fitness, but we rebranded it a couple of years. So it's called Valiant Endurance now. But I've coached for 13 years, I think. And I've helped a lot of people, age groupers, accomplish whatever their goals have been. I mean, sometimes it's, I just want to be a really fit person and train a lot and, not race. I have a client like that I've coached for several years. And then I have athletes who want to qualify for the world championships, want to go out and race for, a top position at a world championship event. Like I have a woman who's going to Kona this fall who has every right to be thinking about like going top 10 in her group. And so it's really fun to work with just such a broad range of athletes. And the way I coach now really reflects the arc of my own training and things that have worked for me, things that haven't worked for me. Because there's been some love-hate seasons in my career in terms of how I feel about triathlon.
I love that. And I love how you said, there's a certain type of person that you like to coach. And I often think about this as I've coached at Fit Body for many years. And you have those clients that they come in and they're motivated in the beginning, but then they they lose that spark and they lose that motivation. And those clients are hard to coach. It's hard to coach somebody who doesn't actually want to be there, who doesn't want to do the work. And so then you're asking yourself, like, why am I wasting my time coaching them? And why are you even here? And so it's like finding people that they're invested and that like this is what they want to do. And for you, you're coaching people to go in a direction that likely you have been. And so you have the experience, you have the knowledge, like what they're going through. And I think that's very valuable as a coach to know, like if someone's having a really hard month and they're training for Kona like you did, what that feels like. And that's awesome. That's so powerful for a coach to be able to say like, I know what you're going through. I've been there, and like, this is how we're going to get you out of it.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting that your listeners might, particularly if you have listeners who wouldn't identify themselves as athletes, which we'll talk about later, which I think is literally as simple as saying and embracing like, oh, I am an athlete. I think it's that simple. But there are people who just don't think of themselves that way. And you say like when you're training someone who maybe doesn't give you the vibes that they want to be there, that happens in really talented athletes. And so it's not a matter of ability that determines whether or not someone's going to be motivated or dedicated or consistent or whatever. It's literally a matter of discipline. That is not a sexy answer. It's not I don't say that in like the life coachy way of like, oh, it's all about discipline and, following through and committing to yourself. But there is an element of like, it's hard work. It's hard work to really give yourself the chance at what you really want in your life. And particularly women, I think it's hard to, when we're so culturally kind of indoctrinated to being taking care of other people, taking care of kids, our partners, our family, like there's this feeling of guilt and sometimes even anxiety around like, can I have my own goals? Is it worth it? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, I love that. And too, like what I see a lot, and I'm sure you see this as well, is like they're working towards a goal and they do convince themselves that they're worth it, but then they have a setback. Like for me, it's always my kids, like they're young, so they need me all the time. When they're home, they need me. And so if they're sick, like if I have a setback where one week I can't get into the gym, that it's like getting in that mindset of this is just a hurdle that I'm going to jump over. It'll be fine. I'll get back on track next week. But a lot of people, they get in that negative spiral of, oh, too many things are going on in my life that are unforeseen, that I didn't plan, and then they can't get back on track. And I think that's really hard to get yourself out of that funk.
This is where, as a coach, one of the things that I've coached single dads, single moms, working moms and dads, and people who just have crazy demanding schedules. And one of the things that I talk to them specifically about is consistency. And so, yes, there might be a week when your kid is sick and like literally all you can manage to do is like air squats in your kitchen or run up and down the stairs when you can. And even if you can get 5, 10,
Right.
15 minutes of something in, even if it's not continuous through the day, moving your body is going to like, you're just trying to check a box, however big or small that box is. And sometimes giving 100% that day is literally checking the I didn't do anything box because I have nothing to give
Yeah.
today. And that's honest. And so it's a matter of being honest with yourself. And then it's nice to have accountability too. So, have someone to be like, coach, what do I do?
Yeah, that has to be now that I'm thinking about it more, that has to be so difficult for some of your clients because you're not talking about someone who's going to the gym 5 days a week for 30 minutes. You're talking about someone who they might have mapped out they have to run 80 miles this week or they have to do some I don't know, maybe that's extreme.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, like just crazy amount of training. And if they get the flu or they get COVID or something like that, I imagine they do probably spiral in their mind like, how is this going to set me back? How am I going to come back from this? And how am I going to continue on that plan? Now that I think about it more, that has to be incredibly challenging for someone training for something like this.
Yeah, it is. And half of my job, I like to kind of joke, is anxiety management for my athletes. Triathletes are notoriously anxious about everything. And so most of what I'm doing is working on helping my athletes work on self-regulation. So the panic of, oh my gosh, I got sick and I have to take 3 days off of training. What does that mean? Well, it means you take 3 days off training and we get back to work when you can. And the impact is the impact. And ultimately, we as humans ascribe meaning to everything we do. But objectively, it doesn't mean anything other than you got sick, you had to take rest, and we will get back to it when we get back to it.
I love that. Okay, so I want to talk about, the athletes and for our listeners that maybe they identify as an athlete now or they say they used to be an athlete. So what do you think prompts women to feel like they are no longer an athlete if they were? They are no longer an athlete if they were.
Well, I think the first thing to make a distinction is when I'm casually speaking about athletes, what I'm really saying, to be more nuanced with my language, is a person who plays athletics or does athletics. Because starting to identify too much as an athlete as your sole identity, or thinking that you have to identify that way, becomes it kind of reinforces kind of this black and white thinking that either I am or I am not, instead of there's part of me that's always been an athlete. So if, that the part of me that in college, that part of me that was an athlete kind of went into hibernation mode for the first 2 years of school where I wasn't playing sports. Actually, I didn't tell you this, but I started playing rugby the first week I got to DePaul and I broke my arm in the first game. So I couldn't do sports. And that, I think, probably contributed to the depression and all the other things. But, when that fire got reignited, when I started training again, I was like, oh, this, I can feel this. It's like these embers started to get like reignited. And it took a long time for, there was this full fire burning. But I think, in anything we do in life, the things that we loved as kids, I think there's always this aspect that exists in us that we can totally cultivate and, encourage. And I think, when you've had time away from a sport and you try to come back to being active, particularly like the older you get, as I'm approaching 40, I told my swim partner yesterday, I was like pulling myself out of the pool and like, my shoulder hurts, my neck hurts. Like right now, everything hurts on me. Like this is just like how it feels to be an athlete. And I'm like, wow, I am really starting to feel my age. And so when you think about people who have had children and gone through pregnancies and put on like more body mass, it's not going to feel the way it did when you were 20 or 18. It just isn't. But if you can think about, okay, I'm not doing this to lose weight or to look better, which those are totally fine reasons to exercise and get back into activity. But if you can think about, oh yeah, there was part of me that loved this. There was part of me that really liked something about this. Starting to reflect on that, that is the thing that will help you come back to it. Because it's like, oh yeah, I feel better at the end of this. Like I loathe going to, class, but I always feel better at the end. Always.
Too, I wanted to ask, what are some sports today? So you swim, you bike, you run. Are there any other sports that you play today that are a part of your like weekly routine, your exercise regimen?
So unfortunately, the way that I have committed to triathlon, it really limits what I do outside of swim, bike, run, because a lot of injuries happen doing stupid, silly things. So, but I will say I'll climb on occasion. I'm not very good at it, but it's fun to go do with friends. I will trail run with like my dog and my partner. And I will, sometimes I'll play tennis. Like if I have a friend that wants to hit the tennis ball, I'll go hit the tennis ball. I'll lift weights and like I'll go ice skate for fun. It's just, just kind of touching those things when I can is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so if you're speaking to like one of our clients who they used to identify as an athlete and say today they're not feeling like they're an athlete anymore. What are some ways that they can just get back to feeling more like they used to or feeling like themselves? Or back into the athletic arena? What are some tips or some suggestions that you would offer up to them?
Well, I think the first is trying to identify what the pain point might be in returning to sports. So if you were a high performing swimmer and you have like these thoughts of when you were like super lean and strong and like you could rock your bathing suit the way that you wanted to, and now you're like, well, I would love to get back in the pool, but I can't even imagine about putting on a bathing suit, going to a pool and having to like start from where I'm starting. And I think most people from a positive psychology standpoint, you would go from the opposite direction. You would be like, okay, what is it going to feel like to like get in shape? Like what's the outcome? And I think that's a totally valid way to work. My other job is I'm a depth psychotherapist. So I'm always curious about which direction you come at things. And I do think we're humans and have a very strong negative bias. And so I think by giving voice and paying attention to the negativity, not in a way to reinforce it, but to just actually be honest about it, can be really helpful. So identifying what's the pain point in returning to the sport that you might want to return to. And if you can articulate that, then you can make a decision based on, am I willing to face this and overcome this and get help to do that? Or is it something that, okay, that sport I need to stay away from and I want to do a different sport. I'm going to take up pickleball, which like apparently is like the new thing for everybody. I have not played it. Do you play it?
So Trevor plays it because he's really good at tennis, but I'm not so great at tennis. So he actually took me. So we're members of the country club up the street from us, and we went to a couples pickleball event. And he like left me in the dust. It was like in the beginning, we were just kind of volleying back and forth. And then they started like putting us in groups based on level. And of course, I had never played before. And so I was over like with these older ladies. It was a lot of fun, but I'm like, come on, you invited me to this. You don't even want to play with me.
You bring up something that's really an interesting dynamic too. And that's if someone's in a relationship with a partner that is more active than them, let's say, because that happens quite often where one partner is more active than the other. And the active partner is like really encouraging of the less active partner. Like, I really want to do these things with you. I want you to like be fit. I want you to take care of yourself. It can feel like a ton of pressure for the person who
Yeah.
is not as active. And there are reasons that they are not as active. And so I think there's like an empathy gap, an understanding gap sometimes from the physically active partner, because they're not seeking understanding from the one that doesn't want to or is self-conscious or whatever it is about the hesitation in terms of like picking up a sport or activity. So that's something that I think partners can work on together too. Can I answer your question? I feel like I went a little off tangent.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit because it got me thinking. So, for me, I wouldn't say, I would say I'm an athlete, but I played untraditional
Yeah.
sports. So, I mean, I did cheerleading and dance and tumbling and, all of those, running. And I didn't play like a team sport, but I'm an athlete. And even today, like I absolutely love working out. And it is just it's a part of me. It's a part of my identity. And so I commit myself every single day for the most part, 45 to 60 minutes of movement. And that's just a part of who I am. And my husband is 100% on board with that because he knows the kind of person that I am if I do not get my workout in, if I don't have that time for myself. So how do you coach people where, say they're committed to their sport or they're committed to training, but their spouse is not on board with that? What would you say to that person and how do you coach them through that? Because I know we have clients at the gym that like they go to the gym alone and their spouse, like they're not on that health journey with them. They're alone in this journey.
It can be really challenging. So there's two different ways that I can approach this. So you asked me what it's like for me to coach athletes. One of the things that I try and do based on my own experience, having been married and having a desire to be an elite age group athlete, which literally means I spend money to do this sport. I don't make money to do triathlon or when I do triathlon. And so it is challenging in some relationships for the partner to understand the importance of putting so much time and effort into something that seemingly is pointless.
Mm.
And I think what was important for me in the relationship or what is important for me in a relationship is for my partner to understand that, like you said, this is part of who you are and part of who I am and part of what I need psychologically and physically is to kind of go be alone and kind of torture myself and like think and ruminate and just be in this kind of process. And so, when I coach athletes, I'm very sensitive to the relationships they're in. And so I do try and create a relationship with the partner if I can, so that the partner knows that they can reach out to me if they're either seeing something in their partner, like, oh, my, wife has been really, really down emotionally. I don't know if you know this, if she's told you. And I don't see that as betraying trust. I see that as data. My job as a coach is to try and help my clients accomplish what they want to accomplish. And sometimes that means being sensitive to the relationships that they are in. Like I have an athlete right now who came to me because their partner wanted the athlete to have more structure because the athlete was just training and training and training and training and training and never home. And so the partner was like, can you hire a coach who can give you some sort of balance because you're never here? And so that's one thing. And it comes down to communication, which dear Lord, my partner would say something really funny and sweet about my inability to be incisive when it comes to communicating. But it's really about telling your partner what you want and need and trying to understand the other person. And if it's like, I want to go on dates with you, but you're never home to take me on a date, prioritize a stupid date with your partner. Not a stupid date, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not all about you, but you do need to understand how much time you need for yourself. And sometimes it doesn't work in a relationship.
Right. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I do like you see this at the gym. Now you'll have a client who they'll do like a 28-day trial with us. And then it's that time where they have to decide, like, am I going to continue on this journey or am I going to, not do this anymore? And they'll say, well, I need to talk to my husband. I need to ask him if it's okay. I need to talk this over with him. And sometimes I say, like, what is there to talk about? Like, if this is something that you enjoy, this is something that's making you better, it's making you a better wife, it's making you a better mom, it's making you happier, then why do you need to talk about it? And usually it's financial reasons, but sometimes it's because the spouse, they don't support this new journey they're taking. They don't support them spending 5-6 days a week at the gym because then they might have to watch the kids or they might have to, do something that they didn't have to do in the past. And so that's challenging.
Yeah, it's something that makes me think about how we socialize younger women in our society, about how to articulate their needs and boundaries. And for any of your listeners who like to read, there's a great book called The Women Who Run with the Wolves, and it's about the archetypal wild woman. I don't know if you've ever read it or familiar with it.
I've heard of it, but I have not read it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book that when I read it, it was at a really pivotal time for me where I needed to be reminded of like, oh, like this fire that I have, this thing that I want, these boundaries I want to set, like that is okay and part of the beautiful, like feminine, like, and I don't mean feminine like a gender way, but like the feminine energy experience of like, yeah, I don't have to talk to my husband. I'm going to do this. And I'll be like, sweetheart, this is what I'm going to be doing. Would you like to come with me? I would love to spend that
Yeah.
time with you. And so again, I do think that's a way that we, as older generation of women, can kind of like look ahead and be proactive with the next generation of being like, yeah, you totally can have dreams.
Right. Definitely. I love that. So I want to touch a little bit because like I struggled with this when being someone who was very into fitness and nutrition and just everything. And then when it comes to time, like, okay, let's start a family. How is my body going to change during this pregnancy? I know I'm going to gain a lot of weight. How am I going to get it off? How am I going to go back to feeling like myself again? And so, what would you tell a woman who, they're contemplating getting pregnant and they're worrying about the loss of that sport in their life or losing their athletic ability?
Well, I'll speak from a personal perspective because I feel I have those same fears and concerns. And, as I approach 40, I have to make a decision about like, is our children something that I want? And it's pretty confronting at this age to be thinking about that because I think it just becomes a little more complicated the older you get.
Oh, yeah.
So I think having a fear in the uncertainty about what is going to happen, I totally relate to. And I'm like tender for anybody who has that experience because it's real and it's a very, I had an eating disorder, and I am very sensitive to like when my weight gets to a certain place or if I feel like I don't look a certain way. Like I am very sensitive to that. It doesn't overwhelm my life like it used to, but it's still there. I mean, that would be a lie. I'd be disingenuous if I didn't say it still lived in me. It does. It's part of me. And so I think being able to talk with the people in your life who are going to be your support system, if you have a support system, and getting really clear about boundaries on like, it will be really important for me to be able to find time for myself to work out. Being able to be clear about like the vulnerability that you have about like, yeah, I'm really worried. Like, are you going to, like if this is a heterosexual relationship, like, okay, are you going to want me physically after I've had a child and finally recovered from giving birth? And like, there's a lot of things that come into play there. And I think they are real, they are valid feelings. And I think it comes down to being really clear with your partner about what you need to feel supported. And I think also setting goals for yourself that you will want to accomplish after you have kids, and making sure your partner is on board for that and being like,
Mm.
yeah, okay, I'm down to get pregnant. And that pregnant person having this thing out in the future that they know they have their partner's, signature on, that like, okay, I'm going to go and try and climb a 14er or power walk a half marathon or whatever the goal becomes. But I think having that vision before you have kids can kind of help in terms of having a goal that's out there that you can follow through on.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back, like you said, to the communication too with your partner. For Trevor and I, when I got pregnant, it was like we never really sat down and had this conversation, like full transparency. I have a friend today and she's pregnant with twins. And the other day she was like, we've been talking a lot about, our family planning and what's it going to look like when the babies are born. And I looked at Trevor and I said, did we ever have conversations like that? And he's like, no. And it was truthfully, it was because we already had the Fit Body Boot Camp location and we just kind of were like, we'll just roll with the punches. We'll do what we have to do. And it was kind of like my baby at the time. And so we knew when Sophia was born, like he was going to have to help out some. So we figured it out. But one thing I always did communicate to him was when I felt like I needed a break and when I felt like I needed that me time more maybe more one day than I did than I did the last. And so I think that's so important, especially for our clients at the gym, is like, if you are dedicated to your health, if you're dedicated to working out, and that's a part of you, that's a part of your routine, like you have to know that that's still going to be a part of you when that baby is born. And you're going to have to prioritize that, or you could lose it because that baby, they can consume all of your time, but only if you let it. Your husband is there to help you. Your partner is there to help you. And as long as you communicate that you need that from he or she, then you should be able to still have that time for yourself. And for me in the beginning, I almost felt like I was, working a very very like not consistent schedule. It was a very like early mornings, or late in the evening when I was coaching. And so Trevor had like a traditional 8 to 5 job. And so for me, to work out, it was traditionally like it was usually like at a very odd time. And so I would have to communicate to him like this is what I need. Like when you get home at 5, I need to go to the gym from 5:30 to 6:30. Like this is what I need from you. And it just took like each day at a time communicating those things, and over time it became easier. It was like he knew what I needed and I didn't even have to ask.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, and again, I'm speaking a lot from like a female perspective, because I think that, this is kind of who we're talking to. And I think that holding boundaries, asking for what we want and need can feel very confronting and selfish. And so it's really sweet that Trevor is so supportive. It can be really sad too for individuals who might not have a partner who can either show up for them the way that they really want them to show up. And so for those individuals, it becomes a matter of being creative and finding ways to still take care of yourself in the absence of a partner that is helpful. God, I'm like so tender for people who feel like they're going through it alone. Doing your best to take care of yourself physically is the best thing you can do, particularly as a parent, to be around for your kids as long as you can.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Lauren, I have loved everything that we've chatted about together today. Where can our listeners learn more about you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so my endurance training company is called Valiant Endurance. You can find me at valiantendurance.com. You can also find us on Instagram. Just look up Valiant Endurance. And then my psychotherapy practice is under laurenvallee.com. And you can also search Lauren Vallee Depth Psychotherapy on Instagram. And that's how you can get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, one question I like to ask all of my guests on the show, Lauren, is what does living beyond the scale mean to you?
Well, it actually brings up a story. And I used to facilitate eating disorder support group back in Columbus. And I remember this one particular attendee would come like pretty consistently. And I remember one day this person was like so fed up with the weigh-ins and the check-ins, and eating disorder treatment can be very intense and intrusive and hard. And so this client told a story about taking her scale and throwing it out of her window, and it like exploded on the front walkway in front of her house. Like just that story and like the joy that like she was like exuding and like laughing about it. And this is, it made me think, when you ask like what's life beyond the scale, I imagine that scale is like expectations from other people and literally being like, don't care anymore. This is about me. This is about my life, what I want.
Yeah.
And only I'm the one who needs to approve and be okay with the decisions that I make and how I operate in the world. I can't control someone else's perspective of me or opinion of me, and that is okay.
I love that. Like, yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
taking hold of the things that you can control.
Yeah.
And just blocking out everything else. I love that. Well, Lauren, thank you so much. I know our listeners are going to get incredible value from this episode. And for everyone out there, make sure that you follow us on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And I would love for you to leave any feedback on this episode in the comments. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And we will talk to you soon.